I've made many mistakes in my life and I continue to make many. But throughout the past few years, I have tried to better myself, and my main goal in life was to become the best version of myself. And therefore, I've been able to eliminate a lot of the mistakes that I've made in the past. And the person that I was a few years ago is quite different from the person I am today. And if I were to give that person advice, this is what I would say. So the first piece of advice I would give to myself a few years ago is to stop lying to yourself in order to avoid taking a risk, experiencing discomfort, or doing something that is difficult. So you're lying to yourself in order to satisfy a lower order goal, but as a consequence of lying to yourself, you're violating what should be a higher order goal of telling the truth and being truthful to yourself, basically. So what you could say is that you've generated a rationalization, and by rationalization I mean an excuse that you use to justify not doing the hard work, experiencing discomfort, or taking a risk. I'm not saying that you should do anything which involves those three things. I'm not saying suffer for the sake of suffering. What I am saying is that in many cases, if you are aiming at becoming the best version of yourself, if you're aiming up, then there are things that your conscience will reveal to you that you will want to ignore because they involve discomfort and difficulty. And whilst it is difficult to distinguish between an excuse and a genuine reason to do something, there are things that your conscience will reveal to you, and those are things that you're possibly not going to want to do, because if you're aiming upwards at something, at the highest good, let's say, there are going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to sacrifice, and there's going to be a lot of difficulty involved in that journey uphill, right? So, you can choose not to do those things by generating a rationalization and lying to yourself, or you can do the hard work even though you don't feel like doing it. And as you progress on your journey, you'll get better at distinguishing between excuses and genuine reasons as to why you should avoid something. There are risks that you shouldn't take, let's say, but there are also things that are hard that you're not going to want to do, right? Now, let me give you an example of something related to this that I was doing a few years ago. So a few years ago, I had a misplaced pride in my image, and I cared too much about what others thought of me. And I had this image of myself that I thought that other people held, and it was an image of someone who is confident and doesn't need romantic relationships, who's putting off romantic relationships in service of self-betterment, and who was, focusing on himself, basically. I was generating an excuse in order to avoid something that I was afraid of, but because I developed as guiding principle the desire to do good, my conscience revealed to me that, I thought that having a family and raising children, having a loving wife are good. And that goal of, say, finding a wife was being violated by my desire to avoid fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment. And rather than confronting that fear or even accepting the fact that that was something that I was afraid of, I was lying to myself and telling myself that I'm not afraid of this, I'm just focusing on myself right now. And that's a lie that you generate to shield yourself. And these things can be hard to identify because you are still pursuing something that is possibly useful or in some sense good. But if it's violating something that is a higher principle, then it's not ultimately good in the long run. That's what your conscience is for, and it will improve over time as your conception of what is good improves. So I had this rationalization that I was focusing on myself, and that was violating this goal that I had, lifetime goal of finding a wife and having children. So I needed to shatter this prideful perception of myself that I held, this idea that I was somehow above romantic relationships. I was telling myself that so that I didn't have to confront my fears. This brings me to my next piece of advice, which is, it's very closely related to the first one. So, confronting your fears is extremely hard, and you need something to make you willing to do it. I can't make it pain-free. I can't make it pain-free for you to shatter a belief that you hold or a pattern of action that you have been crying out for years. There's no pain-free way of doing that, but you have to sacrifice it to something greater. This piece of advice pertains to organizing your fears properly, or more generally, organizing what you value properly. So, to this day, to a great extent, I struggle to approach people in conversation who I think could add value to my life, to speak the truth in conversation when that truth might be something that the other person doesn't want to hear, out of fear of risking my status, risking a argument or disagreement, my pride, honor, etc. And so why do I struggle with these things? It's because I'm afraid of what they might cause. So I'm afraid that if I approach a girl, for example, that if she rejects me, then it will reveal something about me that I don't want to know. It will reveal that I am weak or insufficient in some way. And it's scary to confront those insufficiencies, right? You'd rather just hide them under the mat and ignore them, right? But there's something scarier than knowing how you're insufficient. Just because you haven't gone out into the world and put yourself to the test doesn't mean that those insufficiencies just go away. Just because you don't know about them doesn't mean that they don't exist. And there's something much scarier than realizing how you're insufficient, and that's never understanding how you're insufficient until you end up in hell itself and there's no going back. So this is what I mean by organizing your fears properly. Are you more scared of lying to yourself so much that your belief system is so out of touch with reality that when you rub up against reality, things go horribly wrong? Say, for example, if you don't believe that a brick wall exists, try running into it, you're still going to get hit. You're still going to fall flat on your face, right? So there's something much scarier than knowing how you're insufficient, and it's never knowing it. And there has to be that hierarchy of fears. So it's that idea of conscience again. If there's a higher order goal and you need to confront your fears in order to fulfill it, the way that you can find the strength to confront that is through a fear of something greater. And then that goes all the way to the top, where you ultimately have a fear of God. Life has no easy path. Adversity is coming for you, no matter what. Choosing comfort will not allow you to avoid difficulty. But there is a path upward and a path downward. There is a path that will allow you to nobly face up to the adversity of life, and there is a path that will eventually result in you crumbling under the adversity of life. You know, learning about your insufficiencies is still learning, and it will allow you to grow. Hiding away and shielding yourself from your insufficiencies and brushing them under the mat is only going to feed the monster that hides under there, and eventually it's going to emerge and you're not going to have the strength to fight it. The last piece of advice that I would give surrounding this idea is to focus on the underlying motivations of your actions. Now, this is a very difficult thing to do, and I've intended on doing it for a long time now, and I'm still pretty bad at it. But what you can do is look in retrospect at your actions and think, why did I do that? And you'll realize that you don't know as much about yourself as you think you do, or you don't know why you act in the way you act if you've never thought about this before. And a more practical strategy that I've sort of thought about pretty recently is to journal about this kind of thing every day. So if you take, for example, 3 things that went well or that were good during the day, you write them down, and then you identify the intentions that you had behind those actions. You can more vividly see the things that you should be valuing and you should be intending to do. And then if you identify 3 things that could have been better, you identify the intentions that you had behind those actions, and then you can do better in the future. So when I'm speaking to people, even though I in principle value highest the idea of what would be best for me, people around me, and as many people as I can imagine over the longest time span possible, even though I in principle value that. When I'm in conversation, like I said, there's that fear of having an argument or a disagreement or saying something that the other person doesn't want to hear, or there's that fear of rejection that stops me from interacting with someone who I should have interacted with. So in summary, the advice that I would give to my younger self would be that there are probably excuses and rationalizations that you're generating in order to avoid discomfort, hard work, or taking a risk. But those are things that you're going to need to do if you want to become the best version of yourself. You're going to need to sacrifice your comfort, and you're going to need to make your life harder in a voluntary way if you wish to become a better version of yourself. There are a lot of things that you're going to have to sacrifice to God. And as you evolve your aim, as you progress through life, you will be able to distinguish those excuses and rationalizations that you're using better, because your conscience will better inform you as your aim improves. And I think that what will allow you to voluntarily confront these difficulties, this hard work, and sacrifice to God effectively is to better conceptualize the things that you're going to have to sacrifice in the long term if you prioritize the short term. The things you're going to have to sacrifice if you decide to avoid discomfort and pain and hard work in the immediate future. And a practical strategy that you can kind of undertake to better fulfill that aim and to understand yourself better and to focus on your underlying motivations is to record 3 things that went well and that were good, and 3 things that could have been better each day at the end of the day. So those are 3 things that when I was younger, if I could understand them explicitly, it would have helped me a lot, and I could have avoided making many of the mistakes that I did. I hope that there's someone out there who is maybe similar to who I was past, and maybe this could help them to progress in their life and become a better person and to do more good. So, thanks for watching.